All right, hello there, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. It's Mr. G. We are talking about form today. We are going to go from shapes such as circles, squares, and triangles to forms such as spheres, cubes, and pyramids and cones. Okay, so that's what we're talking about this week here in Studio Art. So, how do we do that? How do we get from shape to form? That's what we're talking about. So that is our project we're going to work on this week. We're going to be doing some drawing. You're going to be drawing in your sketchbooks this week. So you're going to need your sketchbook for this. So if you want to grab that, take some notes while we're doing our presentation here. We have line, we have shape, and we have form. So what are the difference between those three things? Let me get myself up out of the way here. Line is literally a point that is moving in space in a direction, okay? So a pencil line, a brush stroke, a marker stroke, those are all examples of line, okay? Much like our little illustration shows. Now, the second one there, shape, you can see when you take a line and you go and you bring it around and enclose it, that makes a shape. It again is still flat, it's two-dimensional like a line. It only has length and width, so it is two-dimensional, okay? Now there's different kinds of shapes. There's geometric shapes and there's organic shapes. Those are the kind of two basic shapes we have if you just break it down into two binary pieces. Geometric shapes are your shapes that are all pretty much have names, mathematical shapes, circles, squares, octagons, triangles, anything like that that pretty much has a name is a mathematical geometric shape. Now, everything else, like a kidney bean shape or a person shape or the shape of a hand, would be considered organic shapes, okay? Now, form, once we get to form is the quality of three-dimensionality, okay? Now, that can be referred to in two ways. There's actual real form, like a sculpture or something that you can touch and put your hands on and around and go all the way around it. You can tell that it has three dimensions, height, width, and depth. Or it can be implied, such as in a drawing, okay? All right, so how do we imply form? We use value, and value, much like our value scale here, is the quality of light to dark. So we have white on one end of the spectrum, and on the other end of the spectrum, we have black. And everything in between there is the value scale, okay? So that's pretty straightforward. We have light, midtones, and darks, and you are gonna make one in your sketchbook this week, okay? So we apply value to shape and line to build form. Okay, so let's talk about light for just a second. Here we have a sphere, a cube, a cone, and a cylinder. Basic shapes, okay? And we're going to start with basic shapes in our project. So they're going to be white shapes like they are here in this illustration on a white background with white light. That way you can just think of everything in the simplest forms, okay? So when we have light, okay, light creates highlights and reflected light, okay? So when we say light, I've got an arrow here that's showing the direction of our light that's coming in here, okay? Now, light are transversed in waves, in rays. So the closest point to our light on an object is going to be where we would find our highlights, okay? Just like if you took a laser pointer and pointed it across the room, wherever that light is closest to our sphere, we're going to have a highlight, and it's on the cube, on the cone, and the cylinder as well, okay? Along with that, it also creates reflected light. Now, if you look at our sphere there, you'll see there's a little bit of a white cast reflection up along the back side of that sphere. That is coming from the surface it's sitting on. So the light is also not only hitting our objects, it's also hitting the surface of that it's sitting on, which is this white tabletop here in this picture, okay? That's gonna reflect some light back to the object, okay? Now it's not as bright as the highlight is, but it does show up on all the objects. There's a little bit of white reflected back up on the objects on the opposite side of the highlight, okay? Now, the darker the surface that something is sitting on, the less light will be reflected back. So if this was sitting on a black surface, it would absorb most of that light and it would not be reflected back. But on a white surface, you're going to have a little bit of reflected light. Okay, light also creates shadows. Okay, you'll notice there are shadows on all this. So there's a couple different kinds of shadows when we actually break it down and look at it. So again, we have our light in the direction of our light. And remember, our highlight is the closest point of where it hits the object. On the opposite side of that is the shadow on the actual form. So our sphere has a shadow, and notice it curves with the shape of that sphere. The shadow on the cube has a shadow and is flat on one side. On the cone, it tapers down because of the shape of that. And on the cylinder, it follows the line perpendicular up and down. Okay, along with our shadows on our form, we also have cast shadows. So the light that it is blocking that is reaching the surface is casting a shadow. So our sphere casts a round shadow. The cube and the cone and the cylinder also cast a shaped cast shadow. Okay, so let's talk about value defines form. So we use those basic principles is how we break down form or break down shapes into forms and make them three-dimensional or have implied three-dimensionality. So we use this understanding of how light falls on forms to build complex rendered drawings, such as the house we have here, the structure, or something that's more organic, like the sculpture head that is rendered out here on the right. Okay, so that is why we are learning these, so we can learn to be better builders of form. Okay, so first part of our project, step one, we're going to build a value scale using a straight edge, whether it's a ruler or not. You could use the edge of a cereal box or something. You're going to create a scale from 0 to 10. Okay, then you're going to create a value scale from 0 to 10, 10 being the darkest, 0 being the lightest. Okay, now you only have to do this once. Let me make that clear. We're going to do 3 different drawings, one for 3 different shapes, but you don't have to do this for every shape. You just need to do this once. Okay, now the point of this, all the way at 10, it should be completely as dark as you can make it. Okay, if you only have a number 2 pencil, then press hard, make sure there is no white showing through. Okay, and then it should transition gradually up till it gets to 0. And when you get to 0, 0 should be completely white. You should be barely touching the surface of the paper with your pencil on 1. And again, it should transition very slowly down until it gets to black all the way at 10. Okay, now from 5 to 6 or 6 to 7 may not have very much difference, but you should be able to tell it from 10 to 7. There should be a distinct difference as you step along. You should be able to see the transition. You can blend this if you like, but it needs to show a neat transition from dark to light. Okay, so that is the step 1 of our value project. Okay, step 2, we're going to draw a sphere. Okay, and you're going to do this for every shape that we're going to do. Okay, we have a sphere, a cube, and a cone that you're going to draw this week in your sketchbooks. All right, so here is what we're going to do. We're going to create a line drawing. Okay, so take your piece of paper in your pink notebooks, and you are going to open it up, and you are going to split it in half. It's 5.5 inches right in the middle if you want to measure it out. And use a straight edge to draw a straight line. Okay, then you're going to split your page in half. Your line drawing is going to be on the top. Your value drawing is going to be on the bottom. Okay, you'll do this for all 3 of your forms. Okay, going back up again, here's your photo reference. That's what we're drawing. Okay, so you'll notice in my drawing there, I used a coffee cup that I used to make my circle. You can do that. If you have a compass, you can use a compass. If you don't, you can try and freehand it. I suggest holding your breath when you're trying to make careful lines and straight lines. It helps. Try it if you don't believe me. But again, you are going to have a drawing with your line drawing on top and a value drawing on bottom. So that's what we're making. All right, so you're going to sketch lightly first. Do your construction lines, draw from the photo, make sure you're watching the photo. Don't look at it one time, then just jump in your book. Make sure you're going back and forth, referring to your photo often, okay? I have construction lines. You'll notice if you look closely in my picture here, I actually connected the 3 points of the corner behind the sphere. I'll erase those later, but those construction lines help me make the corner accurate, okay? We'll erase those as I said, okay? Take your time and do careful work. Okay, I got some tools laying out that I used for this right over on the side there. Mechanical pencil is going to make very deliberate marks. It's going to make marks that are really hard to get rid of, okay? So I only want to do that at the very end when I'm doing my very dark marks and when I am trying to make a very distinct line. I have a couple pencils. I've got some dull pencils there, and I've got an eraser. Okay, that's just everything that I use for this. If you have a set of drawing pencils, you're welcome to do this, but we're just doing this in graphite. We're not doing this in color or colored pencil or crayon. Okay, so just use pencil on this. All right, after we get our line drawing done, okay, on the bottom, we're going to start to render our value drawing. Okay, the first step of that is to lightly draw in your shadows in the shape. Okay, I call this the amoeba stage, where you go in and you lightly go in and you scrub in where these shapes are by what you see from the photo reference. Again, make sure you are looking at the photo reference. Don't make it up. Look at what you see and record it on your paper. Okay. You should be able to find your highlight. Again, that is the closest to the light source. And then you should see your cast shadow and the shadow on your form. There's also some shadows back in the corner you'll see where the corners of the boards come together behind the form that you want to render in. Okay. Next, you're going to continue to build that value drawing. You're going to start to build your value. A dull pencil really works best for this. Again, I can't say enough that, if you're going to use a mechanical pencil.
Miss Bennett, if you could please call the main office at 8810. Please call the main office at 8810. Thank you.
Excuse that announcement. If you're going to use a mechanical pencil, it's going to leave very deliberate marks and they're going to be very hard to erase, okay? So I'm using a dull pencil here and I'm softly going and I'm just building up layers of value. I'm going a little bit kind of light to dark and building up and looking at my photo reference, going back and forth to my drawing, to my photo reference, and making sure that I am recording the information that I see, okay? Noticing where the darkest darks are and where the highlights are and everything in between. Okay, you will have that whole spectrum of that 0 to 10 in this drawing when you get done. Okay, after you get your value and you're happy with your value, you're going to blend. Okay, now here you could use a lot of things. You could use a little piece of cardboard. You could use a blending stump if you have it. You could use your finger. You could use a makeup blender if you have one of those. I just used a regular old tissue paper here that I folded up in a little triangle like a football, and that way I have a nice sharp point that I can blend into the side, and I blended it in there. Okay, so after I blend it, I go back and I clean up that reflected light. Remember that reflected light on the inside of our sphere reflecting from the surface? You'll see it in the picture. Make sure you include that. Now, I had to erase it out a little bit because it got a little smudgy with my hand, so try to be careful, and I erased out my highlight as well. Okay, once I've got my drawing all cleaned up, the last thing that we're going to do is label all of our points of our rendered drawing. Okay, you notice I have a arrow showing the direction of the light coming in, so you identify which direction this light's coming in. It's coming in from the top right or top left on this picture, and it is, you have your highlight labeled. You've got your reflected light on the backside reflecting from the surface it's sitting on. You're going to have your cast shadow, and then you're going to label the darkest part in the drawing that you see. Okay, in this case it was right underneath the sphere and right underneath the ball where it was sitting down on the surface. Okay, again, when I'm done, this is my finished piece for my sphere. Okay, you're going to repeat these steps for each of the three shapes. So you're going to have a sphere, you will have a cube, and you will have a cone. Let's take a look at those. So here again is our photo reference for your sphere. You're going to draw from this photo, just like I did in our example. There is your cube. You're going to draw the cube, and you will record that. Same thing. Make sure I would advise using a straight edge on this. And then there is our cone. Okay, so those are the three images that you are going to do in your sketchbook along with your value scale this week. Get those all done, and then you will submit those as photos to the project in your Google Classroom. Okay, if you have any questions, please make sure you talk to Mr. Reynolds or myself, and we will be happy to help you. Have a super duper day, and we'll talk to you soon.